Everybody, sit straight, spine erect, eyes gently closed. Shift your eye gaze to the third eye, the center of the eyebrows, to Jyotishmati, the light of awareness within. Take a deep breath and exhale. Let's begin with an opening chant. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavaditamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Welcome everybody for the Youth Excellence Center, the Knowledge Series. We are discussing about Karma Yoga. I'm so excited to see some new folks join. Number one, I'm super thrilled, Anil Garu, the fact that you chose to join. I mean, it's a great honor for me. And for some of you who do not know Anil Prasadji, he's a doctor. He just moved to Frisco. In fact, he's so well versed with Bhagavad Gita. He actually translated the entire Bhagavad Gita into Telugu, the equivalent of Telugu version. So what you're doing is we're trying to, the topic that we're discussing now is Karma Yoga, the path of selfless and self-empowering action. So we're trying to bring the essence from Bhagavad Gita, Patanjali Yoga Sutras, and also some of the contemporary frameworks like Mihaly Flow theory and Carol Dweck's growth mindset and so on and so forth. So without much further ado, let me share my screen. Can you all see my screen? Yes. So what we started discussing in the last class on Saturday is what is Karma Yoga? For many of us who've grown up in India, the karma is something that is very much intertwined into our lives. Many of us have grown up to believe that karma is our fate, or it was also something used as a social engineering tool to two things. One is to guide people into what we perceive as a good behavior, because if somebody does a wrong thing, then you will actually incur some of the consequences and in the future things. So it was kind of used as a tool to guide people into doing following certain principles. But the thing that always worried me the most was it also sometimes allowed people to accept the status quo. So that it kind of numbed the innate consciousness, because it was always assumed that the karma essentially means a sense of fatality or kind of a deterministic world. Like for example, in the last class, several of us were discussing that when we were growing up, when we went to a temple, you see some orphans or some begging, and that kind of to accept those kind of situations, there was kind of a karma theory that was kind of explained, where it was like, these people would have done some bad stuff in the previous life. That's why they had, some of these things. It kind of allowed the society to numb themselves instead of actually taking control of the situation and so on and so forth. But what we're going to see in the discussion is the real interpretation of the Karma Yoga as it was revealed to me by many of my gurus like Sri Ramji and so on and so forth, which is the right interpretation of the karma that I really liked from the Vivekananda and so on and so forth, is karma is about taking control of your situation, taking control of the situation, taking control of the status quo, and you can make your life of your choosing. In other words, you can shape up your destiny the way that you want. And that's why the Karma Yoga is essentially a selfless, but also more importantly, the self-empowerment, action. And that's the reason why, all the other frameworks also fit very well into it, like, the Mihaly Flow theory or the Carol Dweck's growth mindset. Any thoughts, comments? Okay, so before we begin, let's start with a prayer to Bhagavad Gita. Let me sing the opening prayer, the Dhyana Shloka. Pardaya pratibodhitam bhagavata narayanena swayam vyasena grahitam purana muninam madhye mahabharatam advaitaamritavarshini bhagavati astadashadvayini amba tvam anusandadami Bhagavad Gita bhavadveshini Bhagavad Gita bhavadveshini. And the topics that we're going to look are what is karma and what are the laws of karma, and then the karma yoga, the path of self-empowering and selfless action. And then we'll also cover some of the more practical tools that we can apply in our daily life, like the Mihaly Flow theory and the growth mindset. So before I dive deep into it, and I want to offer my sincere gratitude and my prayers to my gurus, Sri Ramji or Ekaji from Ekashri Schools of Yoga. And many of this content is something that I received from Sri Ramji, and I almost listen to Sri Ramji's talks almost every day. So let's, we quickly talked about in the last class, what is karma? And, we just talked about karma is not about fate, or karma is not about a deterministic world, or karma is not about fatality. But it's rather, karma is about taking control. Karma is about, finding joy in every action that we do. And karma is about shaping our destiny. In other words, we have the capability to go create the world that we want. And that is the interpretation that I fully resonate with. And all of you, please feel free to jump in. And the thing that really makes this very interesting is like the satsang. So where, we're all interacting, we're all learning, we're all sharing together. And that makes this more of a collective learning experience. So this is one chart that I created today. And I think, it also describes, some constructs of karma. And, oftentimes, the karma is referred to as, three literal bags. Like, the one is sanchita karma. It's literally your cumulative total pool of karma that you accumulate over your lifetimes. And then the prarabdha karma is supposed to be the karma that you're supposed to kind of a quota that you carry, a portion of the total pool that you're supposed to burn through in one lifetime. And then the agami karma is the new karma that you accumulate from the actions that you do, the new actions that you do. So this is kind of a cyclical process, and this is sometimes referred to as a cycle that we all get stuck in. But this pure interpretation is a cycle that is, is a continuous bondage, and sometimes Patanjali refers to this as klesha jama, any residue that you accumulate based on a series of actions, whether it's a good or bad. You literally go through this entire cycle. We all carry this, this entire pool, and in fact that karma manifests, right? This karma of impressions, it's something that we can actually see. Like, for example, when we are born, we actually carry the impressions from our elders, from our generation, from our ancients, or that's even at some level, even the DNA sequence can be equated to a program memory or some kind of the karma. And similarly, every action, the way you conduct yourself, your associations, your habits, and everything, that also accumulate new type of memories in you. Right? So oftentimes our actions are shaped, most of the time subconsciously and even consciously, by the karma that you either carried over from the pool, or the thing that you, or dedicated or the quota for this life, or something that are shaped by your actions even in a given lifetime. The net result is we often feel like we are stuck. We are stuck in the cycle. But the net effect is we are going through this roller coaster ride of joy and sorrow and this and this and this stuff, right? And that is the thing that we need. We have the capability to go escape, or we can actually change the status quo. The karma yoga, the essence of the karma yoga is to break free of this cycle. In other words, we can actually make each one of our action be what Patanjali refers to as a dhyana jama. In other words, we can actually operate in a residue-free action. Residue-free action, and that actually comes from a harmonious mind. And that's what Patanjali refers to as a skill that we can cultivate, which is what called as a total mind control with a concentration and meditation and samadhi, where essentially we can purify our mind to be this translucent, ripple-free, residue-free, the equilibrium or equanimous mind. Any action that is actually performed from that harmonious sense of mind will become residue-free. And then eventually we can also become, the gunas-free, and that's when we become, as Patanjali said, tada drashtu swarupe avasthanam. That's when we get reposed in the divinity within, the Purusha, or the light of awareness within, and that gets reflected in every thought and every action and every word that we speak. And that's something that we can actually get to, and we can actually go through this series of the karma yoga, the nuggets on how we can go from the left to right, from a klesha jama where we feel like we are stuck in this sometimes a helpless situation that some of us might believe into, that we deal in our day-to-day life, to get into a more of a dhyana jama phase of life, where we can actually experience joy and exuberance in pretty much every situation that we are placed in. Does this make sense? It's kind of a one slide representation of what can karma yoga help us achieve. Ramakanji or Anilji or others?
It does, Srini. I am new to this, but I understand what you're talking about here.
I see. Ramakanji, anything? Or Anilji? Okay, let me continue. So we quickly talked about a shloka from Bhagavad Gita, where we essentially says, like, we are all caught up in this matrix of karma, or matrix of action. And this is a setting we in this universe. And what Bhagavad Gita says is, nahi kaschit kshanam api jata tishtati akarma krita. It's essentially like, there is not even a tiny space or a molecule or an atom or any dimension of time that is not caught in this world of action, world of karma, right? So what it essentially means is, we are, once we have taken this manifestation in the world, we are playing into this matrix of action. And this is sometimes, what we can also say is like, we are caught in this helpless situation, like, and we can equate that to our own microcosm, whether it's at work or in our family, or whether it is in the broader world. We are constantly caught up in this matrix of action. And this is what the huge setting of this universe. And then, but this cannot make us somewhat of fatalistic or depressed or hapless, which is like, why am I caught in this situation? But one is, we need to be aware of that, we are set in this situation, and we can actually then have a control. We can actually make every situation to be more harmonious. And that is the direction that we are headed. So in other words, be accepting, be embracing the situation that we are in, that we are caught in this, continuous, thing of, the people and the world and the environment. This is a continuous activity. And that's what sometimes referred to as a quantum mechanics. And that's what quantum mechanics says. Even in the outer space, there is continuous activity. And that's what Patanjali even said. Even meditation, when we sit down to do the meditation is also a state of action. The only thing that Patanjali defined is tasya prashanta vahita sanskarat. When your thoughts are harmonious, it's a series of continuous flow of harmonious thoughts. And that's when you're in the meditative state. But it is still an active state. And that's what Patanjali defined as tatra pratya ekatanata dhyanam. When your mind is continuously producing a simple stream of, flow of thoughts, and that are harmonious, and that state is known as meditation. When the frame from one movement to the next movement, ekatanata, when it remains the same, when that image and the thought remains on one thing in a harmonious way, that is what is known as a meditation. So even when we sit calm in a meditation state, that is also a state of karma. The only thing is that is a harmonious karma. And that's what Patanjali defines. Tatra dhyanajam anashayam. When we are in that harmonious mind state, and when we are acting in from that state, then all our actions become anashayam, residue free. That's what Patanjali refers to as dhyanajam klesha. Right? And then the first sloka that we covered, the last one is almost like a recipe. It's almost like a recipe that is one that is often perhaps the most widely quoted, which is karmanyeva adhikaraha te. If you break it, the sloka goes is like karmanyeva adhikaraste ma phaleshu kadachana ma karma phalahe heturbu mate sangatva karmani. This is the sloka. But when you actually break it down, each line is a very profound statement. The first one is, it says karmani eva adhikaraha te. What means is we only have the right to perform our duty, with the rightful conduct. That's all we are entitled to. But what the second line says is ma phaleshu kadachana. We do not have any right, we do not have any entitlement on the outcomes. And oftentimes the root of the misery is because we often feel entitled to the outcomes. And that's when the misery actually comes in. If you only focus on the steps and doing the right thing with the right conduct and not fixated on the outcome, that's the recipe. And then the third one actually is a very interesting thing, which is like, the karma phala. If the phala, don't let the phala, the outcome be the influence, the heturbuhu. Don't let it be the reason for why you're doing an action. Like, for example, I want to get into Stanford, or I want to get into, some money or fame or any of that. If your actions are defined or driven by one of these outcomes, and particularly if there are selfish outcomes, self-centered outcomes, and ultimately it is going to result in a misery. And the last one, it says like, but it doesn't mean that you don't act. It doesn't mean that mate sangatva akarmani. Akarmani means do not act. Because sometimes, we often feel like, what is the point in working hard, or what is the point in me working hard when everybody around me is not working hard? Or what is the point in me doing anything, because, the world anyway does not, justify this. And that's where the very profound thing comes in. Don't ever sign up for inaction, because the world, you may think that the world may not be rewarding you, and that's the reason I think it is 4 lines are very, very profound. Number one, we only have the authority to perform our action with the rightful conduct, with the right dharma, and we are not entitled to the outcomes, and we should not let our action be driven by an outcome. And the last one is, it doesn't mean that, we do not choose not to act. The laziness or lethargic in some of those things are not the right way to conduct ourselves. And then with that, let's actually switch to some of the laws of karma. And this is a very, very profound statement. when we look at this karma theory, a lot of people believe that, I'm haplessly caught up and I'm being forced to do certain things, or I'm being compelled to act this way. I'm being compelled to be in this way. We are often are actually giving some reason for why we are doing certain things, right? But what law of actually karma says is like, it actually signs up with a very much of a free will. It actually reinforces our free will, not as a deterministic theory. What it essentially says is you are a free choice making agent. In every situation, whether we are at work, whether we are at home, whether we are at school, in every context, in any sphere of our existence, the karma, law of karma, puts you at the center. It literally says you are a free choice making agent. And this is a very, very profound statement. Oftentimes, we're always attributing some environmental condition as an attribution. We often attribute a situation or an environment around us to doing what we are actually doing, right? And in fact, when we were discussing this in one of the previous workshops, and there was a high school kid, and the high school kid actually brought up a very good point. And this is like, I do not believe that I have enough choices to make the right decision for me. I feel like I'm compelled to do this because my parents are forcing me to do this. So in other words, she was expressing her hapless situation that she's actually having to act because of a pressure from our parents or other peers or other things. But that is not the right interpretation. Oftentimes, maybe that interpretation might actually suggest that we may not see enough good choices, better choices, or we may see that we have limited choices to act in any situation. That's the reason why we are actually going on this stuff. But the law of karma actually says that once you get into that state of dhyana jama, you actually always make the right choice. You always make the right choice at your own free will, and that becomes residue free, and that will only guarantee joy for us. And this is a very, very powerful thing. We always have to believe and empower ourselves that we are making conscious, deliberate choices that are based on our free will that actually are going to result in a joyful state. And any comments or thoughts on this? Shruti, are you online?
Yes, I'm online.
I see. Any thoughts? Any thoughts from you? I mean, do you feel like your actions, whatever you're doing, you feel like sometimes they're forced, or you believe that every action that you're doing is something that's of your free choice making?
I think currently every choice I'm making is a free choice by me. There are times when other people will have me make other decisions, but I think while also making your free choice, it's important to listen to others too. But currently, I feel like all of my decisions are free choice making decisions.
I see. I see. Deepak, anything that you want to share? Or do you have any insights on the choices that you're making in your life in different spheres, whether they feel like they are your own free choice making, or they're being forced or compelled?
Sorry, I was trying to find my mute button. So the way I read that and the way I understood it, Srini, it's about the question is every action you're taking is out of is it a free choice of yours, right? And I don't know how to answer that question, because yes, there are things I can do that's my choice, but there are certain things I need to do, not out of choice, out of the fact that it is just my responsibility to do it, whether it's my choice or not. So that's how I'm looking at it, whether it's work or life or personal stuff. There are things that most of the things I do, yeah, I'm making a choice, conscious choice, but there are certain things that I do because it just benefits others or it's for others.
Exactly. I think the interesting is I think, there is a recipe that we actually, how we can actually make the thing. It's like, there are certain duties that we do, like, for our kids and this and that, right? Or for our job and this and stuff. The more we make every action be bound to our selfish gains, including your own passions, actually, right? That actually believes, this mind actually creates this chatter of you versus me. What am I doing? Is it for my benefit, or my means, my circle, or for somebody else? The more you're doing things for the benefit of you or your own thing, eventually that may caught up in not creating a harmonious mind. It'll actually create some kind of a chatter, and the chatter actually results in some kind of the misery down the road, right? The more you make it as a selfless action, right, in the welfare of others, right? You completely, like what Vivekananda says, is more of a servitude kind of a thing, the more harmonious and joyful that experience is going to be. And that's when you will have even more choices. The more you drop the self-centered motives, then you suddenly believe that, there are a lot more choices on how you can actually respond to every situation, right? So anyway, we'll actually see that in a couple slides there. The first thing that, this law of karma, this is a very universal thing. I think, Anilji, I think in this law came from Swami Bodhananda's book on 7 spiritual laws of life. And one of the laws is about law of karma. And what it essentially means is, Shruti, like what you said, every action that you're actually making is, when it becomes your own free will choice, what it actually means is every action is a choice, and it also produces a corresponding result. Because once we taken up the free will thing, we also become responsible for the corresponding outcome. So this one, we actually have some corollary rules. There are about 6 or 7 rules. So the number one is, we basically say this is like every action that we do, it has its own consequences. I mean, the universe operates it this way, which is like, it's almost like a Newton's laws of physics. Every action has a reaction. So whatever the action that we do, when we make the free choice making, whether you do consciously or subconsciously, every action has a consequence. That is rule 1. I think, we all can pretty much agree to this. We may not see the consequence, or we may not have the awareness to see the consequence, but as the universe, the cycle of karma, as it states, sanchita karma, prarabdha karma, and agami karma, everything starts accumulating. And then the rule 2 is very profound. But at the same time, every action has a consequence. Not every action has a consequence. In other words, a consequence cannot be the reason for somebody to act. Every action that we do, it will have its corresponding measurable kind of a consequence. But a consequence cannot be the source of an action. What it means is we cannot react to every situation. And most of our actions, or not most of them, in today's world are driven by reactive tendencies. Particularly in the social media, there is no shock absorbers anywhere. When some message comes in, it kind of creates some kind of a bubbling mentality, and we feel like compelled, like, we need to act. The universal law of karma says that we have the opportunity, we have the capability to strengthen this muscle, to not have to act on every consequence that is out there. Does this make sense? The distinction between the two?
Srini, not quite for me. Maybe it's just me. So you're talking about all actions have consequences. You can't take actions, and you can't. How do I put it? You can't do things keeping the results in mind. right?
Yeah. So basically it's like, like as an example, the universe, what happens is when anytime any action performed by anywhere, right? Every action will have certain consequences, right? The universe sets into a motion of rolling kind of set of act, the triggering of, the action cycle with the consequences. There is kind of a ripple effects, but that effect cannot drive another action. Like, for example, as an example, if somebody, it's kind of an extreme kind of a thing. If somebody creates some kind of somebody behaves with you inappropriately, that inappropriate behavior cannot be the source of another action for you. So in other words, we have the capability and we have a choice to let a consequence from a previous action be the source to trigger another action. So that means we have the option to break free of this cycle. In other words, what it essentially means is like, don't react to other things that are right. We have the capability to not react.
Get it, Sri.
Right? Shruti, does it make sense?
Yes, it does.
Right?
Yeah.
So in other words,
yeah, but
if somebody,
the words, I was only curious. I was only curious when it said not every action. I can understand this in the sense not reacting. I understood it, but not every action has a consequence.
As a source, essentially it's like, not every action cannot be bound to a, like, for example, when we look at the first thing, what we are saying is
every action has consequences.
In a consequence.
Okay.
Right? Not every action, this is almost like the negation is not quite true. Negation does not have to be true.
Can this be connected, like let's say so we say one is karma, the other is vikarma, and they talk about akarma. So are we talking in the sense of akarma, like when there are actions which doesn't lead to consequences, like whenever you do any work for the creator or towards the creator or for the creator, right, an intention or the gratitude towards the creator, then it doesn't have consequences, they say. Are we probably implying it here that way? I'm just curious.
Akarma, actually, that's another dimension you talked about, and my brain was going in the last thing, which is like, it's essentially like a no-op action, right, or inaction, right? Inaction,
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Right? It's an inaction, and the thing is, what you're also talking about is if an action is not following a brahmacharya, in other words, brahmacharati, right? It's a brahmacharya, right? If it's not going in the direction of the Brahman or serving the higher supreme, then what happens is, then it's gonna, then the way I understood is, then it becomes a klesha jama karma, right? It becomes a residue accumulating. What it actually essentially saying is, we have a choice to not caught up in this continuous cycle of action, reaction, because the world is actually.
That also I understood, but somehow for a new person who is reading this without your explanation, I was only curious, maybe the wording, is it a bit, maybe a confused, probably for the audience, until it is explained, right? I think they might kind of get confused. Like the other earlier gentleman who said, hey, I did not understand it. So I fell into the same. Yeah.
I think we probably have to.
I think the intention I understood. So we can move forward.
I think, you're absolutely right. I think we probably have to phrase this differently, which is that, the first one essentially says like, beware that, whatever you act, it will have its own consequences, right? This stuff. And then the
second one could say like, there are actions which doesn't have consequences. There is an action mode that doesn't lead to any consequences.
Yeah, action should not have a consequence as a source or something like that. A consequence cannot be a source of action or something like that.
Yeah, right. No, please go ahead.
Right.
We are fine.
So essentially what the net here is, don't react to situations. Everything would have to be a conscious action. but it cannot be a reaction. We have to minimize the reactive tendencies, right? Because the reactive tendencies where our mind is not in that equilibrium, the samyama state, right? We basically is like mind is only operating, at the 10% or even less, and then we react. So what here is like, and then the recipe comes in is every action, if it does not want to include the consequence, and that's the recipe, which is like, you always have to be, your mind needs to be in a very harmonious, thing. And that's when things are going to be in a great state. And then the law of karma, rule 3, we actually, read this in many places, almost like in every faith also tries to reinforce this. What it says is like, what you sow, so shall you reap. Which is like, basically it's like, your actions, the quality of your actions and the motives of your actions. So the thing will essentially, you will receive the same in kind. It's how you act, that's what you're going to do. And we saw this, right? Most of the time, we often, again, we play the victim mindset or the fixed mindset, where it's just like, I had to act this way because, the other person did this. But the thing is, like what Gandhi said, be the change that you would want to see in the world. In other words, the change starts with you. If you want to see more kindness and compassion and the love, you should start seeding those. You should start sowing those seeds now, so that it comes back to you. The world is going to come back to you that way. And this is also explained in Patanjali Yoga Sutra when we talked about the first yama principle, ahimsa. And that's what it says, ahimsa pratisthayam tatsannidau vairatyagaha. When you practice non-violence and compassion and love in Trikana Shuddhi, Manasa Vacha Karmana, then you develop a superpower within you that actually influences the surrounding and the people around you to give up violence. But right now, most of the violence is because, we are being very reactionary. So the law of karma, the rule 3 says is like, what you sow, so shall you reap. If you choose to act in a non-compassionate way or in the thing, that's what we are going to see in the environment. That's what is going to get back to you. Any thoughts or comments on this? It is very straightforward. And then it's kind of a similar thing, it essentially says is like, the world operates like a boomerang. What goes around comes around. We just have to sign up for this, right? If we choose to act in things, spreading non-universal human values, and we may not see the immediate ripple effect, but it's going to come back and catch up with you. So essentially, we have to establish in being kind, being compassionate, being love, and being joyful. Even if you're not joyful, if you're always complaining and this stuff, and you will immediately see that the world around you also becomes very complaining, right? So the law of karma, rule 4 is what goes around comes around. Be kind, compassionate, and love. And then the rule 5 is also says like, not only every action has a consequence, it is actually almost in proportion. Every action has an equal and opposite reaction. I think, we all can, agree to this. And the next rule is always, it's kind of a continuation of what you sow, so shall you reap. The way to act towards others, the way you are acting towards others, you exactly act to yourself. You do the same thing to yourself. Like, sometimes, I'm trying to make this as kind of my principle. Sometimes I share this with my kids. If they come to me for any advice or how they deal with them, I basically, the first thing that I do is like, I'm trying to give them the exact same advice, like what I would do to other kids, right? Or how you would want to be treated. That's exactly how you want to treat others, right? So always try to see yourself in the people around you or in the situation around you. And that way you would actually break the separation of you versus me. And that will also allow us to pursue the sense of oneness. So that's the next rule. Does this make sense? What you do to the others, you do to yourself. Essentially, we have to maintain the consistency in how you act towards others versus others are the same as you.
Yes.
Right. And then the last one, the two more is the law of karma. Essentially says that you are the creator of your destiny in every situation, in the workplace, at home, in the world. And it basically says like, law of karma is not a fatalistic or a deterministic thing, but literally law of karma or karma yoga essentially is a very self-empowering message. If you want to get somewhere, you have the power to create the destiny for yourself with the right conduct. And we will actually see some of the recipes. And the last one is from one of the Patanjali Yoga Sutras. And the law of karma is all inclusive in all the roles that we play in every action, whether we are the direct perpetrators or we are the influencer for somebody to act in that context, or if you're simply a witness approving of those actions. In all these three roles that we perform, whether it's a direct actor or a vicarious actor or simply an approver, in all the three roles, we accumulate the consequences. We accumulate the context. So does anybody have any recollection of the Patanjali Yoga Sutra? Patanjali actually mentions that in the context of Yama principles. And it's one of the, perhaps the longest, the Yoga Sutra. Vitarka himsadaya krutakarita loba krodha moha purvaka dukkhanantapala iti pratipaksha bhavanam. Dukkha jnanantapala iti pratipaksha. And then there is another one. So vitarka himsadaya krutakarita loba krodha moha purvaka mrudu madhyadi matra dukkha jnanantapala iti pratipaksha bhavanam. That is the right sutra. What it essentially says is, if we act in any non-compassionate way, or any act of violence or non-compassionate way, in any one of the roles, whether you are the kruta, direct actor, karita, influencer, anumodita, approver, driven by lobha, krodha, moha, purvika, driven by either greed or lust or anger, in whatever the intensity, mrudu madhyadi matra, mrudu is like light intensity, madhya, medium intensity, or matra, adimatra, which is like, the higher intensity, in whatever the form of the action or non-compassionate behaviors that you do, dukkha jnanantapala, which is like the ultimate net result of that is a lot of misery, unbounded misery. Unbounded misery is the net result, is what Patanjali actually affirmed as the universal law. And that law of karma abides by that role. Ramakantji, any thoughts about this? So let's move to so how do we break free from this cycle? So before we get into the actual recipe of the karma yoga and some of the techniques like flow theory and some of those things, one of the things that Patanjali actually said is, so we are, number one, the settings is like we are caught up in this world of action, in our family life, in our work life, and this broader universe where every moment, every space, every situation, we are caught up in this web of action, web of karma. That means every action that you do, it goes through its own set of action, reaction, and all these things. But then how do we break free from this cycle? How do we make sure that how do we empower ourselves so that we are making the right choices, the right free choices that do not accumulate any one of this action, reaction kind of cycle? And that's where Patanjali says, Ridhambara Tatra Prajna, which is like, when we build enough of intuitive powers, the intuitive powers guide, and that intuition, when our intuition, the divine powered intuition guides our actions, right? It's not driven by profit or loss, that the mind faculty where it is actually doing a profit and loss about, if I do this, what do I get, and so on and so forth. When you not let your mind do this profit and loss kind of calculations drive your actions, but you let your divine intuition, that's what we nurture and grow. It's already there. We just have to connect to it, connect to that source of divinity and that intuitive power. And that's when we invoke that intuitive, the divine power, and that's when Shruta Anumana Prajnabhyam Anya Vishaya Visheshartavat. What it means is, when you're not driven by the things that you are seeing, that the things that you're feeling, that you're being perceived by your mind and the senses, but rather you're transcending that, you're letting the divine power powering that, the prajna, the ridambara prajna. That's when you accumulate more dhyana jama klesha. You'll always make the right choices. And we see that in some of the highly accomplished, chess players or the chess champions, or even some of the sports people and so on and so forth. They train their mind to be very harmonious, singularly focused on the task that they are actually doing. And at that time, they just go play the ball and they just make the moves. And those moves always tend to be the right most of the time, or almost all the time. And they don't think, like, when the chess champions are actually doing, they basically suddenly come up with more choices than what one could imagine. Because they are cultivating that inner samyama and the intuitive powers. They're not just simply comprehending what they are seeing and believing and seeing and touching and feeling, and they're not letting that limited knowledge be the source of their choice of action. But they are actually cultivating a deeper intuitive power, and that is becoming the source of their action. And that's why they're making the right choices. And that's why they are actually developing more and more infinite power to be the masters in their domain. And that's a capability that all of us have. And it all comes with the practice of the samyama, the total mind control, keeping your mind in a harmonious state, and also following the right yama and niyama principles. And that is the path of karma yoga, which we will cover in the subsequent classes. Any thoughts and comments on this?
We are doing good. We are doing good, Sunji. Please go ahead.
Right. I mean, I think
wonderful topic.
Yeah. I think this is what we need to cultivate. Our responsibility to cultivate in all the youth. Youth means everybody that has an opportunity to challenge the status quo, right? And I think most of the time, the people who are actually challenging the status quo are often caught up in this entire drama. And this is what the setting of Bhagavad Gita is, right? At the beginning, Arjuna feels like he's compelled to act, and he feels like he does not have enough good choices. So he was in that the ultimate setting of the Vishada, because it's like, why am I why do I have this one choice, the restricted choice, that I would have to fight this battle and kill my own family? And he feels like you only have very limited choices. Either you would have to kill his own friends and family and this all this stuff, or he just have to surrender to the mountains. And he's contemplating that why fighting this battle is the right choice for me. Why wouldn't it be better for me to just go to the caves and do meditation without having anything? Because he did not have that ridambara prajna. He is not acting with samyama, with the harmonious mind. He was operating with a cluttered mind. But once Bhagavan Krishna, explained the concept of, how to purify the thing, then he was empowered with better choices, where he could actually fight the battle, but in a detached way. He was, not in a very harmonious, in a way he was acting to the situation. And that's a choice that we can all do, because otherwise what happens is, when we are caught up in the situations, the work and the family, we often feel like we have very restrained choices, we are compelled choices, and then we are making right trade-offs, either quit or this or that, quit, walk out, and so on and so forth. I think what the Karma Yoga allows us to do is to prepare ourselves so that we can actually still do the things that we need. If we need to challenge the status quo and transform the thing, but we can actually do that in a much more harmonious way, where we are always established in the joy. And that's what Arjuna did, and that's what we have the capability to achieve in all the situations that we have. So in the subsequent session, we're going to get into some of the tools and techniques. So let's wrap up the question, and we have a few minutes, if anybody wants to offer any reflections. Anilji, anything that you want to add? Or Shruti, anything that you would want to add? Deepak?
Nothing to add, Srini, but thank you so much. Obviously, I'm more curious and want to learn. So certainly helpful. There are certain things today that you shared, certainly as making me think and making me more curious. So thank you for this.
Yeah, I think, the thing is, ultimately, it's all about how do we maintain ourselves in a joyful state in whatever the situation, right? Let not the situations around us control our joy, but rather we basically always be in a harmonious state, no matter what the universe throws at you in this kind of a karma thing. So with this, let's close our eyes, shift our eye gaze to the third eye. Let's chant Om 3 times. Take a deep breath. One more breath. Om Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinah, Sarve Santu Niramayah, Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu, Ma Kaschid Dukkha Bhag Bhavet. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. We wish everybody to be happy. We wish everybody to be free of sorrow and illness. We wish everybody to see only auspicious things, and let there be peace everywhere. With this wonderful intention, rub your palms, generate the fire of knowledge and love. Cup your eyes and transmit this knowledge to seek for the right vision, the divine vision, to see the things the way they are. Divyam dadamite chakshu. And slowly and gently, with a bright smile, open your eyes. Thank you all for joining on this knowledge series satsang. And hopefully, if you are in Frisco, we would welcome all of you to join us at the YEC Center. Otherwise, we'll see you again on Saturday evening. Namaste.
Thank you.
Jai Guru.